So let me get this straight. The Louvre, one of the greatest art museums in the world, was robbed in 2025 like it was some sort of Ocean's movie? Or a Now You See Me movie, which I know they said they had nothing to do with, but mysteriously the third film was, like, you know, doing all this advertising in Paris around that time.
Coincidence? I think not!
Regardless, I found out whilst recording this video that it was actually gems that were stolen, not some sort of, like, painting. So the bit's kind of ruined. And also ultimately pointless, but considering I've already taken the time to set it up, we might as well pretend as if something was stolen as in, like, a painting. Maybe not the Mona Lisa, but something somewhat close to it. Now, I'm no art connoisseur, I know basically nothing about the painting game. I mean, I did a pretty cool stickman growing up, and maybe a cool flower on canvas. But I do have some ideas for consideration to replace this painting. So at least, like, you know, give it a look before you completely write off any of the designs I've made. So, you know, just have a look. But in all seriousness, I was looking at some box arts for upcoming releases and kind of stumbled down a bit of a rabbit hole of not just new releases, but a lot of the older ones as well. I mean, I'm talking all the way back to the Mega Drive, but I was having a look, and it really made me question what sort of mysterious substances that some of these developers and art teams were smoking, because how do you come up with some of these things? But then as I was going through them, I discovered some trends as well over the years, and I just kind of want to have a look at them and kind of poke fun at some and kind of get the idea of what other people are thinking about this. So, you know, let's just get into it. Now, I know we all want to laugh and question the bad and downright ugly box arts. Don't worry, Checkers Party Quiz, we're going to get to you at some point. But before we can do that, we really need to understand what makes a good box art. You don't just accidentally come up with something like this. So how do you come up with it? I did do some research on this, so we can at least pretend I'm the expert. In regards to that research, it was definitely looking stuff up online and watching videos and not sitting in a weirdly padded room staring at boxes for 23 hours a day for the last couple of weeks. Yeah, definitely was researching stuff online.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Anyway, a good sign that the box art is pretty good is the fact that it gets the attention of a potential consumer. How you do that? Yeah, bold colours, fancy artwork, whatever way really, but as long as it fits the tone and setting and and makes the game look appealing is kind of the main thing. Now, making a game box art interesting and selling it is kind of difficult for some developers. I mean, I'm not going to point any fingers or name any names right now, but there is definitely a company that is somehow not doing the best box art for what you'd think would be the easiest games to do it for. Not naming names or pointing fingers at this current moment. But for me personally, I find that the box art needs to kind of fit the game. You know, you don't want to be going and buying something like Doom and it being filled with unicorns and bright colours. You kind of want the box arts that we've been getting. There are a few exceptions, and it's all coming down to personal preference, because being good is a whole, good box art is pretty subjective. Now, it's worth noting that everything I say here is purely opinion. There might be a box art on here I say that is good that you don't like, and there might be a box art that I say I don't like that I think is good. Well, if that is the case, please do not DDoS me, please do not leak my IP address, please do not send a brick through my window. However, I will say you are allowed to put a horrible comment in the video. That's fine, I can live with that. Or if you really want to get creative and leaving the comment isn't good enough, take a Switch 1, it can be any of the models, just a Switch 1. Load up that copy of Batman Arkham Knight, and just go to the highest point on the map and just look over Gotham. Once you're at that point, it should start to heat up a bit, right? Throw it in my window. I'll respect you for doing it, and it's the easiest way to get away with the crime. Just keep that in mind. Alright, so let's just start off with something easy. No one's going to deny how good the Breath of the Wild box arts are, right? Because I was trying to decide if I should talk about the Japan and US cover, or if I should talk about the European cover. Because both do the same thing, just using different techniques and in different ways, but both do it really well. So instead of picking just one because that was too difficult, I'm going to do both because For some reason I thought giving myself more work would be easier.
Idiot!
I mean, on the surface level, both are going to get the attention of a, potential consumer. It was the launch of the Switch 1, there was like 2 other games out at the time, and I can only ever remember seeing Zelda on the store. But more importantly, it's got the name Zelda in a big bold font on the front cover. That sells alone. But both covers do display a feeling of adventure that the game is going for. So I'm going to start with the US and the Japanese cover, just because that's the one that I feel like most people have seen around the world. Now, the first thing I noticed on this cover was the fact that Link is standing alone, facing towards Hyrule with his back to us. A little bit rude. The game did take 5+ years and countless delays, and a lot of people questioned if it was even going to come out, and it finally turns up and he's not even going to face us. Bit rude, just saying. Anyway, Link is standing alone facing the vast, untamed open world of Hyrule. Which I like that. It kind of gives me the vibe that this is going to be quite a lonely journey, a lonely adventure that Link is going to have to go on and that we're going to experience, but it also kind of shows that the world is kind of our sandbox. We can do whatever we want. Now, the other thing to note with Link on this box art is the fact that he's actually quite small, especially in comparison to something like Skyward Sword, where he was the focus point. Now, I like this. It shows that, he might not be that important to this adventure. Yes, he's the hero. Yes, he's going to save Hyrule. You could arguably do this with just a stick. You don't need the Master Sword, which, Link needs to get. So anyone could technically do this, it's just that Link is the one that steps up to do it. One of the most important things I also noticed on this box art was the colours used on it. It's got a very melancholy vibe, in my opinion. You've got the sun setting, so you've got the oranges, and you've got the dark blues, which is quite different in comparison to what the EU had.
Nothing brightens a dark room like light from a window. Time to open the window! Oh, no!
But I really like this colour scheme because it really emphasises that this is quite a sad and dark story. I mean, you lost. Hyrule got taken over, Zelda is being held captive, and all of your companions and friends died. And as you're going through this world, you're seeing the aftermath, you're seeing all the monsters run wild, you're seeing the fact that the residents of Hyrule are terrified. So I really like that about this cover, and I think it really conveys the feeling and emotions towards the game really well, and really gets you ready to jump in, I feel. Now, do I think that the US and Japanese cover conveyed a bit more about what the game actually was? 100%. I think it did that perfectly with the colours and the posing, like I said. However, I am a little bit biased towards the EU cover, purely because that's the one that I saw everywhere growing up. I do like it a little bit more because I love the more brighter colours and how much it stands out. Aside from that, I do also just love how it displays the adventure a different way. Just like the US and the Japanese arts, we have Link standing alone, but on a cliffside now. This time he's looking directly at us with his sword drawn, which always gave me the feeling that he was waiting on us to start the adventure, or maybe inviting us to it. Like a proper call to action sort of thing. Whilst we're talking about Link, this cover focuses more on him instead of the background, really emphasising his role in this world, sort of showing that he is the key to saving it, and how integral he is as opposed to the US and Japanese cover. But lastly, the colours are much brighter, like I mentioned before. These colours look more like the ones you'd see in the game, really giving an exciting feel to the world, and almost made me want to load it up and explore Hyrule more. Now, do I think the US and the Japanese versions display the tone of the game better? 100%. But do I prefer the European version? Absolutely. However,
both is good.
Alright, really big popular game cover talked about at length. Tick. Now to talk about one of my favourites. Your eyes did not deceive you, humble viewer. Those are the only Dead Rising games. What do you mean, where's Dead Rising 4? It's right there. I can see the confusion though with it having a 3 in the title. What do you mean Frank West in the 4th game? Oh, you must mean the Deluxe Remaster from 2024. I mean, that's technically the 5th game, but regardless, I'm combining that with the 1st game, because the covers are pretty similar, let's be realistic here. Anyway, moving on. I love the Dead Rising covers and how they display the game's core selling points, but also how it captures the tone of each game respectively. Well, starting off with Dead Rising 1, this is easily the most iconic of the box art, so let's break it down. You can clearly see our protagonist Frank West holding a TV, looking pretty aggressive, surrounded by zombies and in the mall. I mean, that tells you all you need to know, right? You're going to be playing as a regular guy, using whatever items you can find in the mall to fight off the undead horde. So you might be thinking, is that it? You know, is that all there is to this box art? I mean, it's a pretty basic one, all things considered, and yeah, you'd be right, it is pretty basic on a, you know, first look. But it's when you take that deeper inspection, the amount of zombies on there, you might be thinking, is there really going to be that many? You know, most games can show a lot of zombies on the front cover, and they'll probably be lying. And you'd be right. But Dead Rising got its name for the amount of zombies on screen. Its whole selling point was the fact that you were going to be constantly surrounded no matter where you went. There was more zombies on this game, and on your screen at one time, than any other game around. It was a technological milestone. It was incredible when it came out. And still is to this day, in my opinion. You know, the fact that they all work by themselves. But, to me, there is one more thing that makes this cover iconic, and in my eyes, it's easily the aesthetic of the cover. It really tries to look like a gritty and realistic movie poster, with the colouring and trying to sell you on it having a fairly realistic tone in the story, which in the case of Dead Rising 1 is pretty true. It's a pretty simple zombie story, but it does have some pretty decently high stakes. And it wasn't until the later games where the series really got a bit wacky with its, you know, ideas. But I also want to point out the UK Dead Rising 1 cover, because no one really brings it up. But I also love how this one looks a bit more simple in a lot of ways. It's just loads of zombies in the mall, and I always really liked the fact that it was from the perspective of someone looking in through the entrance windows, and the zombies looking back at you. I just thought it was a really cool design choice, and I'm surprised that I see literally no one else bringing this up. Now, as the series went on, it did get a little bit more wacky, as I mentioned earlier. It still kept the mostly realistic tone with its story, but however the gameplay did get some upgrades, and the cover art had to display that, so moving on to my personal favourite in the series, Dead Rising 2. Now, as the series went on, it did get a little bit more wackier with a lot of its gameplay decisions and ideas, and that all started with Dead Rising 2. You know, it brought in the series' now iconic combo weapon system of combining two different objects or weapons and making them into one. You know, it really made the series stand out even more than it already was with the hordes of zombies. So how do you advertise that? Quite simply, you make the protagonist hold one of the coolest ones. Now, as much as I love the Dead Rising 2 cover, it does lose the movie style that the last game had, and doesn't really tell you nearly as much as, you know, Dead Rising 1's did. For example, I can't even tell where this is set, but we can see that our new protagonist is here. And he's clearly some sort of motocross driver based off, you know, the outfit that he's wearing with that jacket. And we can see that he's able to combine weapons, as mentioned earlier, but of course there's also hundreds of zombies around him, so we can expect there to be massive hordes again, bigger than the last. But there is one key thing on this cover, and, you know, the keen viewers and people looking at this with great observation skills might notice this little guy back here. We have a zombie in a tuxedo, and that's not out of the ordinary. There might have been someone getting married. This is a fictional Vegas, the game's based in after all. But more importantly, the Servbot helmet from Mega Man. Now, to me, this signaled that this was going to have some sort of more fun aspect to it compared to the first game. You know, it was going to be a little silly at times. So, you know, I feel like that was a really good indicator with that zombie. But whilst researching this video, I did actually come across the Dead Rising 2 Japanese cover, which I never see anyone really talk about, and I think it just does the themes of this game so much better. I mean, we can kind of see in the background we've got some sort of entrance to a resort, which, you know, kind of tells us where we're going to be. It's going to be some sort of resort hotel, potentially. I mean, it's more of like a Las Vegas, but we actually can see Chuck holding a little girl, which being his daughter Katie, and he's desperate, surrounded by the undead horde. It really gives you a bit of a better understanding of the game, and just by having Katie there, it really shows Chuck's main motivation, which is going to be protecting her at all costs. Now, quickly moving on, we have Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, which served as the director's cut version of Dead Rising 2. Mostly because there was a pretty negative reception to the new main character Chuck, because he wasn't as charismatic as, say, Frank West. Personally, I think he was pretty charismatic. But regardless, Frank was back. And I haven't really got much to say on this cover, if I'm honest. I still love that it displays the new area of Fortune City, you know, the game's setting in the background with the rides, and you can really tell that that was kind of one of the big upgrades and big additions to this game. And you can see that Frank is walking, you know, away from the horde with a massive explosion behind him, showing that he's in complete control, but also... Cool
guys don't look at explosions.
Now that I've shown my age a bit, you know, let's just move on. But as I was saying, you can see that Frank is in a lot of control in this one. This isn't his first rodeo, he's done this before, and you've seen that with Willamette in Dead Rising 1. So moving on to Dead Rising 3, whilst I think DR3 is easily the weakest game of the series, I think the box art is awesome and only second to the first games. The series was getting bigger and bigger with each game, and now instead of being in a mall or a casino, it was an entire city. So to portray that on the box, they put our new protagonist Nick facing towards the city, kind of like Link was in that first Breath of the Wild cover, really emphasizing that, you know, it's time to go, it's, you know, ready to go on this vast adventure. But the city's covered in zombies to really emphasize the fact that, you know, we're still keeping to the core features of the game series, being that the zombies are everywhere. It doesn't matter how big the setting is, there's going to be more zombies. But I also think this game perfectly showcases or teases the latest gameplay innovation here. I mean, Dead Rising 2, it was the combo weapons, but if you look closely, you'll see that Nick is wearing a mechanic's jacket, and we can see a vehicle in the bottom right. Now, a vehicle on its own, well, it's a city, you'd expect vehicles, but combine that with the jacket, kind of teases the idea that we're going to be able to combine vehicles, which, you know, if you played the game, you know you absolutely can. The biggest change to the cover is the fact that it's a lot darker and a bit more serious, and that's because a certain someone thought it would be a good idea if this tried to rival The Last of Us.
Phil Spencer, head of Xbox.
But the cover portrays this with a much darker colour palette, desaturized image, and I personally don't mind it on the cover, but I think in terms of the game was too dark. It felt like it was trying to be too serious, but still had all the wackiness of Dead Rising, so I just don't think it fit, and I don't think many reviewers and the sales really thought about the same thing either. But unfortunately, that was the end of the Dead Rising series in terms of new games. How many times do I have to say this? Dead Rising 3 is really Dead Rising 4, and that it was the last canonical game in the series at the time of making this. So let's just drop it, and let's just be happy that we have the deluxe remaster. And potentially any others, if that report was true. Okay, we've now looked at, in total, like 6 different covers that I would class as pretty good. So let's just move over to the more fun stuff, shall we? Let's have a look at the... Now, don't get me wrong, a bad box art can also catch the eye of a potential buyer, and it does it for all the wrong reasons. Just like my boy Mega Man over here. I mean, come on, what were we thinking here, Capcom? How do you go from this to this? I mean, over here in Europe, we didn't have it too bad, but at least there's that. But it could be a whole video spent talking about bad Mega Man box art, so we're not going to do that here. But it does make you kind of question how they got like 11 mainline games plus a bunch of spin-offs and sub-series, and yeah, how did this series even get big based off the box art of just the first game alone? But if we want a more recent example, we need to look no further than Batman Arkham City Game of the Year Edition. What do you mean this isn't recent? Arkham City isn't that old, it came out in like 2012. What do you mean that was 13 years ago? The PS3 and 360 aren't even that old.
Whoa, this is heavy.
Yeah, Arkham City has a great box art, I hear you say. It's clean and obvious as to what it is. A Batman game, but a damn good one, and you'd be right. But I'm talking about the Game of the Year edition, to be exact, and let me tell you, this is the gaming equivalent of trying too hard. I think it's easy just to show you it. You know, I think this game might be good, guys. Maybe even Game of the Year worthy. A 10 out of 10, you could say. I just think you might have to own it. But seriously, who designed this thing? Like, yeah, I know it's a Batman game and it's Arkham City from the white and red style, but do you really need to do all that? Wait, oh no, it got worse. I just discovered the spine and the back of the box, and I know this ain't in the cover, but I gotta mention it now that I've seen it. Even the spine is loud and the back being full is fine, they're meant to be, but geez, how much text do you want to put there? I'm like reading a high school essay here. The thing that makes this box art so bad is, as I mentioned earlier, it's too loud. There's too much going on. I mean, what are we meant to be showing here? I mean, the original box art didn't really give you much to go off. It just kind of showed Batman perched on a rooftop looking over a city, which told you kind of that it's going to be a bit more open world than what the setting was. This one doesn't tell you anything apart from the fact that Batman is in it, and apparently it's a really good game. It's just there's too much going on. if we're talking bad box arts, we could be here for hours, days, weeks, months, possibly years if we want to go game by game by game. And I don't really have the time, and I really don't think you people do either. And also, speaking of, that's a lot of work for me to do. I'm like a one-man band here. I don't want to be doing all that for just one bit. But if you recall earlier on, I did spot a bit of a trend happening, and I think it's best that we just look into that name. And that trend was the floating heads and zoomed-in faces, or as I noticed, just PlayStation exclusive covers recently. So, just to, get this off my chest here, I've only really included the floating heads bit because there's one cover in particular I want to look at. Which I know I just said we won't do that, but this will take literally 2 minutes, don't worry about it. I honestly could not find any other covers that had floating heads on it. I don't know why. I checked everywhere, I just couldn't see any, so I'm sure they exist. If you know more of them, please put a comment or something. I love looking at these things, I really want to see them. But what's that one game I wanted to mention for this one bit? It's the Silent Hill 2 remake. Now, I'm going to remove my feelings towards this game for a moment, because I think someone would probably throw a switch through my window with a certain Batman game loaded up on it for my opinions on it. I think this cover's actually okay. I like the fact you got James walking through the town into the fog. It really kind of sets up what's going to happen in the game, and really kind of tells you the tone. I mean, it's Silent Hill 2, most people know it, but the thing I don't like, if it wasn't obvious, it was Mary's floating head. I mean, why is it there? I mean, well, I know why it's there, it's what James is looking for, but why? It ruins what could be a perfect box art, It looks like a Marvel movie poster. I mean, it looks like the Spider-Man Homecoming one, where it just had Michael Keaton and Robert Downey Jr.'s heads just in the air for some reason. I don't understand what the fixation is with it. I really wish that they just, removed it or something. It would have been so much better. I really get bothered by the floating heads, but arguably the worst one is the zoomed-in faces, and they're becoming more and more common as time goes on. I mean, in 2025 alone, Konami did 2 of them. And I'm pretty sure they launched within a month of each other, or at least pretty close to that. I mean, are you sold on these games? Snake's high-definition face staring into your soul? I mean, I just think it's a little lazy and doesn't really sell you on anything. Or say what it's about, and yes, I know that's what the back of the box is for. But I mean, how often do people look at the back of the boxes these days? But the front still needs to say something about what's going on. I mean, in Metal Gear, I can see that Snake's the main character, I guess, and in Silent Hill, I'm going to be playing as this person, and there might be some sort of red flowers. But I mean, let's just make this clear. These are not the worst offenders of this. There are significantly worse ones, and that moves us on to our next culprit. So, our worst offender of this trend, it's a God of War game, and that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but before we reveal it, let's have a look at God of War 1 and 2, shall we? I mean, the box arts are lovely. We've got Kratos fighting off some enemies and doing some cool poses, and you might think that God of War 3 would stick to that theme, right? Have Kratos fighting someone. Something crazy, because I know God of War 3 has those type of moments. He could be aura farming, as the kids would say, and I never want to say that ever again. Back to it. Here's the God of War 3 artwork they went with.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So apparently the protagonist's face wasn't enough. We need to just see their right eye. Don't get me wrong, it's God of War, but that doesn't mean you have to stop doing cool box art. I mean, at least it got remastered on PS4 though, right? Maybe they've changed it, maybe it's improved, maybe we do have one of those cooler front covers.
God damn it!
At this point, I think I'd just take them showing his left eye with his right. But let's move on, because I'm sure there's at least one person screaming at me for using the Silent Hill F Day 1 edition cover, and me calling it the main cover, when in fact it isn't. And you would be right for screaming at me for doing that, because, yeah, it's not the main box art, but the thing with Silent Hill F is its second box art does something I don't like as well. And it's just having the protagonist stand there. This isn't the worst offender of this trend, so please lower that switch before you launch it at my window. But I think for Silent Hill, there are much better ways to show the protagonist in the town. I mean, Silent Hill 2 Remake has already done that, if you just remove that goddamn floating head. But as I said, this really isn't the worst offender of this trend. That goes to most PlayStation exclusives in the last 10 years, and it's important to note that it's not all of them, but man, is it more than it should be. I mean, let's take Returnal here, for example. A game about someone stranded on a planet where time is looping every time she dies. She fights massive aliens, and there's crazy structures on this planet. So what's the most logical box art here? The protagonist just standing there, obviously. Are you telling me there was literally nothing else from the game that you could pull from for this cover? Just to make it seem just that a little bit cooler to sell someone on it? I mean, this is a new IP from a new studio. No one knows these guys, or at least if you do, it's for their smaller pieces of work, which it doesn't mean they're bad, but, you know. But I mean, this is part of the bigger problem. As I said, PlayStation keep doing this for almost all of their exclusives at this point, and, you know, again, don't want to name names or point fingers at bad box arts, but there is a certain studio that's doing it more than most at the moment. But before I finish up this section, we've really got to look at one more really bad one that really highlights probably the worst when it comes to the PlayStation exclusives, just to kind of prove that point. And, dear God, it's God of War again, isn't it?
Well, this is bad on so many levels.
What happened here? Why? I mean, we've got God of War Ragnarok, right? We have a sequel to one of the biggest games of 2018, and it's based on the insane event that is Ragnarok and Kratos finally taking on Thor and Odin. So to advertise this to you, let's just put the two main characters standing next to each other on a stock background. What are we doing here, fellas? I mean, this is God of War. You can do better than this. Show Kratos and Atreus fighting one of the other gods or something. I know the 2018 game did something similar with just the two of them standing on the boat, but that still kind of gave a sense of adventure, and, you know, it told you that we were now in the Norse realm, not the Greeks. It did what it had to do. This time, you need to give us a bit more action to show what the game's about, not just the two main characters standing there like it's a stock background in the game. And I mean, what really annoys me here is that they could have done something like the God of War 2018 Deluxe Edition cover, which that's a whole other can of worms that annoys me, that this was the cover compared to what we got. Like, what we got was okay, but this is obviously better. But I think these types of covers annoy me so much because it's for games that could easily have much better ones, and oftentimes do get better ones made by fans, or, as we said, in the Deluxe Editions. But 9 times out of 10 now end up looking like the generic ones that you would see in the background of a film or movie or cartoon, instead of, you know, actually having any sort of effort put into it and really have care. Now, we've looked at the... and we've also looked at the... Now, I want to look at the ugly. What, did you think I was going to do a title card for each one? It kind of gets old, and I'm really starting to get bored of making them and editing them. Like I said, I'm a bit of a one-man band here. So, you know, cut me some slack now every now and again. Anyway, moving on to the... Did I catch you out? Did you really think I got fed up by making them? Sorry, it was just such a low-hanging fruit and was just such an easy one to go for. I had to just do it at least once. But anyway, so looking at ugly, or should we say random, because I feel like calling something ugly is pretty mean. I mean, look at Cheggers Party Quiz. I mean, he's not the most attractive looking game box of all time, but he's trying his best. Now, I can say this section exists for the sole purpose of mentioning Cheggers, or Snow White's 7 Clever Boys, or Carnage Rally, I think that's what you say. And to an extent, that is the truth, because I mean, look at these absolutely amazing works of art, you know, in their own special way. Like, look at my boy Doc here, he has seen some shit, god damn! I mean, but in reality, this section purely exists to purely bring up the random shovelware titles on DS and Wii. But before we can continue on this section, I really need to ask, fellas, where were you on the 22nd of September 2009? Don't worry, I'll give you some time to think. And that's all the time we have. If you weren't in line to pick up Russell Grant's Astrology for the DS, I need to know right now, because this was a life-defining moment for every nanogram of a DS. But seriously, who asked for this game? I need to know. Imagine someone checks your star sign, but instead of getting their phone out, they load up this 10 out of 10 masterpiece. I mean, we might have to give this the Arkham City Game of the Year edition treatment. Now, I know Mario Kart World disappoints a lot of people this year, and many went to Sonic for their kart racing needs, but I would like to throw another into the Thunderdome. What do you know about Jimmy Johnson's Anything with an Engine? This is not a rhetorical question. I'm really asking because I know literally nothing about this except for the fact that Jimmy John is a made-up name that I'd come up with, and he also looks like he's in pain here. Like, Jimmy, buddy, you're not selling this to me at all. Especially with that face. Is a gun being pointed at you? Do they have your family? Did they show you when Optimus flatlined in the hit movie Transformers 1986? Because if so, me too, buddy. We've all been there. Okay, but, you know, we've just looked at some of the really dumb and random ones really quickly. Really highlighting the most weird and wonderful things that you can find on the Nintendo Wii and the DS. But I think we should end this on a positive note. What do you guys know about Pets Monkey Madness? Because once again, I know absolutely nothing apart from the fact that this box art is amazing, and I kind of get the impression it might be like Nintendogs and Cats, but with monkeys, which therefore is the better game. And I'm pretty much sold on that alone. I mean, just look at the cover, it's amazing. And oh my god, there's a DS version called Pets My Monkey Family. Where has this been my whole life? I need this right now. Can we get this remastered? I mean, Ubisoft, you make this. I know that you're remaking Assassin's Creed 4. Scrap that. Let's remake this instead. That could get the company back on track, alright? But there's just something so funny about these stock images on the cover. Like, someone got paid for this, and you know what? I can't even laugh at them because I'm jealous. I want that job. This, you know, they've just handed in my high school photography coursework and got paid more than I think I'll ever earn. But, alright, I'm now done looking at these because it's now turning into me just looking at random games and laughing at them. But, you know, I do kind of want to try these games at some point. So if, you know, people are interested in my opinions on such great hits as Richard Grant's Astrology or Jimmy John's anything with an engine or whatever the thing was called, or more importantly, Pets Monkey Madness, just like drop a comment or something. I might have to go get these. I'm really just looking for an excuse to buy these games. Please give me a reason. I beg.